Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress. Only 1 week left. In 7 days the first game of the World Championship match between world champion Magnus Carlsen and his challenger Fabiano Caruana will be played in London in the United Kingdom. On Chess to Impress we keep continuing the countdown. Carlsen-Caruana is the 47th match in the history of the official and undisputed World Championship. And on Chess to Impress we're looking at the first 46 matches, and we have arrived in 2008, where world champion Viswanathan Anand defended his title against his predecessor Vladimir Kramnik. The top of the chess world was split between 1993 and 2006. I explained this in the previous videos. In early 2006, FIDE announced the conditions for the World Championship 2007. An 8-player tournament which included FIDE World Champion Topalov, but not the classical World Champion Kramnik. FIDE later organized a reunification match between Kramnik and Topalov, with Kramnik to take Topalov's place in the 2007 tournament if he was to win the match. Kramnik did win the match, so Topalov was excluded from the 2007 World Championship. Kramnik, if he lost his title in 2007, which he did, would play a match with the tournament champion in 2008. And that's what happened. Anand won the tournament in 2007, was the world champion, and then had to play a match against Kramnik, who said that his title was with Anand on loan. A statement which hugely motivated Anand. The match took place at the Art and Exhibition Hall in Bonn in Germany from October 14th till October 29th, 2008. 12 games were going to be played, the same as in Carlsen-Caruana. Rapid and blitz tiebreaks to follow in case of a 6-6 score after 12 games. At the time of the match, Anand was 38 years old and Kramnik was 33. Here a picture from the match. The challenger Kramnik on the left and the champion Anand on the right. The match started with 2 draws, but then Anand won with the black pieces in a Meran game, a variation in the Slav defense. Game 4 was a draw, and in this video we're going to look at Game 5. Let's get into it. The game was played on the 20th of October 2008. White Kramnik, black Anand. The score 2.5, 1.5 in Anand's favor. And Kramnik opened with d4, d5, c4, c6. And in Game 1, Kramnik played the exchange variation of the Slav, c takes d5, but in Game 3 he played knight f3, and so did he in Game 5, this game. Knight f6, knight c3, e6, both players copy the moves of Game 3. e3, knight bd7, bishop d3, Anand took, bishop takes back, b5 kicks the bishop back, bishop to d3, and a6 also played in Game 3, and it had only been played once before that. The Slav defense is full of move order subtleties. e4, c5, still following Game 3, e5, c takes, and knight takes b5, looks spectacular, but is in fact well-known theory. A takes b5, e takes f6, and you cannot take back with the queen because of bishop g5 that traps the queen. That would be a disaster for black. So after e takes f6, Anand took with the pawn. Kramnik castled and queen b6. Kramnik actually has experience in this position with both white and black, and I'm taking the comments that I'm giving here in this video from the magazine New in Chess, where Anand's second, Peter Heine Nielsen, analyzes this game. And it's interesting that Peter Heine Nielsen was Anand's second in those days. Nowadays he is Carlsen's second. Queen e2 was played by Kramnik here. Bishop e4 was tried by Kamsky against Kramnik, Kramnik with black, in a tournament in Linares in Spain in 1994. But Queen e2 was played, the same as in Game 3, and here Bishop b7 from Anand, still following Game 3. Nielsen explains that b4 and Bishop a6 are both more popular than Bishop b7, And he writes, the move played by Anand seemed to catch Kramnik by surprise back in game 3. Up to now, everybody had been of the opinion that developing the bishop to its most natural square, b7, and then continuing as if black has a massive attack is an unrealistic dream. But Anand shows it's for real. And both Kazimjanov and Anand himself had come up with this idea independently. In fact, they were a bit disappointed that their great idea in the Moran seemed to be the same idea. And that's what Nielsen writes. When they started their trading sessions, both Kazimjanov and Anand said they had a great idea in the Moran and were slightly disappointed that it turned out to be the same move, the same concept. After bishop b7, Kramnik took on b5, restoring the material balance, and now bishop d6 was played in game 3 to stop white playing bishop f4, but now Anand deviates from game 3. He plays rook g8 instead, the new move, sidestepping the improvement that Kramnik undoubtedly had found after the bishop d6 move. But now bishop f4 is possible, bishop d6 and bishop g3, and Nielsen explains that this is the drawback of playing rook g8. White can solidly block the g-file without having to open the long diagonal. This is the long diagonal. Anand played f5, a high-risk, high-reward decision. Time is of the essence, writes Nielsen, and black wants to open up the g-file as quickly as possible. The fact that it also destroys a safe haven for the black king on e7 matters less. The king is now not as safe on e7 with that pawn on f5 and not on f6. Rook fc1, a good move, says Nielsen, played after a long think. And Nielsen explains that one of the things this move does is stop the queen going to h5. After f4 is pushed, the queen likes to go through c5 to h5, but that is now no longer possible with a rook on c1. f4 from Anand, he keeps going forward. Bishop h4, bishop e7, and Nielsen explains black has no useful waiting moves, whereas white can strengthen its position with a4. Black has to act with urgency. a4 came, the bishops got swapped, and king e7. Nielsen writes, staying true to his policy of urgency, black does not give white any respite. Only the slightest delay by black would allow white to force through b4 and a5 with a great counter-attack. After king e7, Kramnik played rook a3. He played this move as well in game 3, in a different position. Then it was a mistake, and here it's also not the best move. Nielsen gives g3 as the best move, removing the weakness from g2. The pawn on g2 is weak, and by moving it to g3, that pawn is no longer weak. Quite instructive. But rook a3 was played by Kramnik. Rook ac8 from Anand, who decides that the c-file is as useful as the g-file. This is quite a game. Kramnik took, Anand took back, and the rook back to a1 to take any back rank issues out of the position. Queen c5, queen g4. Kramnik seemed to be optimistic here, hitting the pawn on f4 and planning rook a to e1 next. Queen e5, knight f3 hitting the queen, queen f6, and there comes the rook to e1, and rook c5. Nielsen notes that, strangely enough, it is very difficult, despite the unbalanced character of the position, for either player to make useful moves. It's not obvious what black would do if it was his move, and white has the same problem. Kramnik came up with b4, and rook d1 might be the best move, said Nielsen. But that's not an easy move to make after having just played the rook from a1 to e1. To move it back is psychologically a tough thing to do. Nielsen gives a few moves after rook d1, knight e5, the knight gets swapped, and this is about equal. But b4 was played by Kramnik. Rook c3 from Anand. And Nielsen says that queen h5 is the move here. It still looks decent for white, but black is definitely comfortable. But here, Kramnik made a mistake. He took on d4, is giving up a piece. Kramnik saw that he would get the piece back. He played this after 1 minute of thought with 15 minutes on the clock and 11 moves to make till the time control. Kramnik must have thought that Anand was hoping to save a difficult rook ending. We'll see that variation in a minute. But knight takes d4 is a blunder. Anand took the piece. Rook d1. White is going to win his piece back on b7. Knight f6 is the only move, counter-attacking white's queen, while white had attacked black's queen. Rook takes d4, knight takes d4, the queens are swapped, and now rook d7 check with a rook fork wins the piece back. Let's continue. King f6, and white has to take the piece back. White has regained the material, but his king is now being killed by black's remaining pieces. And this is what Kramnik had not seen when he played knight takes d4 4 moves ago. Anand gave a check. Bishop f1 only move. And here comes that rook endgame that I just mentioned. Knight takes h2. King takes, rook takes f1, and f3 is a very good rook ending for white. And Kramnik may have thought that Anand was going to try and defend this. But after bishop f1, Anand did not take on h2 to get into that rook endgame. He played the much stronger move knight e3, and by this time Kramnik had seen it. There's a great picture just before Anand plays knight e3. No poker face from Kramnik on that picture. He had seen what was going to happen. An easy move to miss when you have to calculate is 5 moves in advance. Why is this so good for black? Well, if you take, and that's what Kramnik did, he has no choice, then f takes, and actually Kramnik resigned here. He's a piece up, but he resigned. Nielsen said it's a cruel end to an exciting game. Why is this so terrible? Well, the rook and bishop are totally powerless against this pawn advancing. Let's play a5, e2, the bishop is pinned, king f2, and black has a new queen and wins this game. The best move for white here is rook c7 to give away that rook. Rook takes, and then you can untangle a bit, but not much. g3, rook hurries back to c1, king g2, rook c2 check, king f3, and black also wins white's bishop with rook f2 check. King takes pawn, and there goes the bishop, and these two pawns are no match for this rook supported by the king. Anand won back-to-back games with the black pieces with the Meran variation of the Slav defense. And as you can see here, he also won game 6 with the white pieces, was 3 points ahead halfway the match. 3 draws followed. Kramnik won game 10, but game 11 was a draw, and after 11 games Anand had won the match 6.5, 4.5 and remained world champion. But then there was still Topalov, who had won the FIDE World Championship in 2005, lost the reunification match in 2006, and by losing that match lost his place in the next World Championship, the round robin tournament from 2007. But he was given certain privileges for the next cycle, and that resulted in the Anand-Topalov match in 2010. I'll tell you all about that match in the next video. Hope you enjoyed this video with a great win from Anand in the Meran. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. If you liked the video and the series, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. The link to the series is here. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.